This is Metro Week, our top story. We're talking trash. We'll visit Tucson's main landfill and ask how long it will keep taking our refuse. Then our Journalists Roundtable analyzes the week's news.
Welcome to Metro Week. I'm Andrea Kelly. What happens to your trash after the dump truck leaves the curb is not always a burning question for everyone, but it's a pretty critical part of our society. We're at the Los Reales landfill today to find out about recent upgrades the city did to the facility so it can keep taking our trash. So come along as we find out.
I'm Frank Bonillas. I'm his landfill superintendent at Los Reales landfill for the city of Tucson. And right now we're at the fill phase where all the trash comes from the city of Tucson and surrounding areas. So as the trash trucks come in and they dump all the trash here in the working phase, we have our dozers that are pushing the trash up into the working phase. And then the compactors are compacting all that trash. So by permit, we're required to compact all the materials. At the end of the day, what happens is that we have to cover all the trash for overnight. So we use, what we use is tarps. So it's an alternative daily cover. So once we have a full lift, which is about 20 feet, then we have to cover it with soil. And then we can move to the next fill. This is our oldest scales, and actually walking on the old scale. And this is the inbound where the trash trucks would come in. We're no longer using these scales because we have the new scales on the east side of the property. And eventually this whole area will become fill area trash. The other buildings that we're not using, also the administration building and the household hazardous waste area. This location is our entrance new facility. This is where we have the new scales. This is where all the customers come through. They weigh in, they go dump their trash, and then they come and weigh out through the outbound. We also have an automatic scale for our commercial customers that they have RFID tags, and all they have to do is come through the third scale, and the system captures their weight, and then they dump and they can leave the site without having to come through the outbound. This landfill has about a 50-year life at this point, so we'll be going south all the way to the dirt piles that you see out here.
Now we'll find out what those upgrades mean for the future of the landfill. Tucson Environmental Services Director Andrew Quigley explains.
Well, these are the permanent facilities for the landfill. You know, the landfill life right now is calculated at 50 years, and they are really relocated from an area that we eventually will put trash in. And so we wanted to set them up with the new facilities for both for our employees and for our customers. So it's state-of-the-art scale house and much better accommodations for the employees, for their locker rooms and well-being.
So back where we were, the old scales, the old office, that's going to be full of trash.
That's correct.
What was the original lifespan of the landfill before those upgrades?
The landfill was approved in 2006 in terms of this plan. And that's where the life expectancy of 50 years. We acquired more property. This 80 acres to our north was acquired for the scale house and administration buildings. And the footprint was expanded back to the south for the landfill to expand to the later years.
How much did these upgrades cost?
The landfill scales and administration building and infrastructure that we put in ran about $7 million. The acquisition of some of the adjacent residential properties to keep to maintain a border of the landfill is going to cost about $1.3 million. And then eventually we will do about $5 million in additional upgrades, including a new self-serve center or self-dumping center for pickup trucks and what we call hand loads, and not have those happen on the fill face that we currently do right now. We'll separate those.
And those are happening right here.
That's correct.
Alongside the big
Trucks.
dumping, the city trucks
Right.
and the other recycling.
Right, and it's very inefficient in terms of space, safety concerns, and everything else. And so we're going to be constructing probably in the next 2 years a new self-haul facility.
What was the alternative? If you had not done these upgrades, what would that have meant to this landfill site?
Well, we'd have to eventually relocate or lose space in the landfill if we didn't construct these new facilities. So we would have lost probably 10%, 15% of the landfill because we wouldn't be able to fill there because we had these infrastructure things. But we had old trailers. We had that were secondhand trailers from other landfills. All of those needed to be upgraded at some point. So shouldn't you put that into a new facility instead of continuing just to kind of do Band-Aid work on those facilities for both the administrative staff and for the employees?
Where did the money come from for these upgrades?
All of this comes from the fees that we charge here at the landfill. They're all part of our fee structure. So Environmental Services collects waste and recycling from 137,000 residential customers and about 3,400 commercial customers, and they all pay for disposal, as well as we take waste from third-party haulers, Republic Services, Diggins, and others who dump here, and they pay us for that waste. All of that goes in toward our fund, and that's how we fund our capital.
How does this landfill compare in size or in what's dumped here to other landfills that are in Pima County?
Well, there's only one operating landfill in Pima County besides ours, and that's a waste management landfill in Marana. I'm not sure of what their tonnage is. I think it's about the size of what we do on a daily basis. I don't know what their waste footprint is, but we are certainly the biggest landfill in the city.
And what's the tonnage?
We do about 1,500 tons a day of waste coming in here, and we're open 6 days a week for the public to come and dispose of their material.
What's the plan once this 50-year lifespan ends for this landfill? What's the plan for our trash?
Well, I would think that we would be looking at either contributing our waste to another landfill somewhere, or perhaps applying a technology that might be able to make us more self-sufficient. Waste incineration and waste heat recovery and doesn't really make sense right now for us unless we have a carbon tax. And methane, the methane we generate is a greenhouse gas, and it's a really nasty greenhouse gas. And if we were to incinerate this waste, we would really reduce our carbon footprint. But since there is no carbon tax, we are regulated by the US EPA, and we have to recover methane, and we do. But we don't recover all the methane. We do the very best we can, and there are certain regulations that we have to follow that are from the US EPA as well as Pima County Air Quality, and we comply with that. But ultimately, if there was a carbon tax, then we would need to do something else with our trash rather than simply put it in the ground and let it degrade.
Now, are you, a city employee, making those plans, those long-term plans, or do you expect that to be taken care of by private companies once this landfill reaches its end?
Well, I think the mayor and council ultimately approves these plans. And so, in the next 50 years, we certainly will be having those discussions as to what to do. But ultimately, the regulatory framework is really going to drive us as to what we do ultimately. We could simply transfer waste, build an enclosed facility, and put them into tractor trailer trucks and drive it to a new landfill somewhere. But I would hope in the next 50 years we'd find a way to handle our waste within the city and do it in an environmental responsible way.
So tell us what's happening behind us here on the landfill right now.
Well, what we're doing right now is our daily operations. I've got a compactor and a bulldozer, and they are running over the waste that's dumped from the trucks that come in. They're offloaded hydraulically, pushed out the back of those trucks, and then the bulldozer levels them off and the compactor drives over it. Each piece of equipment there is equipped with a device that takes readings as to its elevation and is able to calculate the compaction rate that's going on. And we want to achieve a relatively high compaction rate, say 1,800 pounds per cubic yard. And that screen shows the operator how many more times he must drive over that area to be achieving that. So it's a highly technologically, it looks like a dump to everybody else, but there's a lot of technology at use in those pieces of equipment. Each one of those pieces of equipment cost well over $1 million. We usually have them rebuilt instead of replaced. Usually though, by the time it gets to its third life, we look at replacing it with a new piece of what we call steel. But right now they are usually recycled and rebuilt.
And those are used 7 days a week?
7 days a week.
Always in use?
Yep.
What's something that might surprise people that most people don't know about the landfill?
That we treat 1 million gallons a day of contaminated water and reuse it. It's water that has removed PCE and TCE contamination. A portion of this landfill is unlined, and therefore the water is being contaminated by the leachate in the unlined portion, and we're withdrawing that, and we treat it, and then we spray it on the landfill for dust control.
Environmental Services Director Andy Quigley, thank you so much.
Glad to do it.
Arizona lawmakers reach a deal to settle a long-standing lawsuit, but the state treasurer says it will come at a cost.
It's not this big grand fix that it's being trumped out to be. And keep in mind that this only lasts for 10 years. And that's what I'm trying to tell everybody is, why don't we do things that fix it forever going forward?
Now we're back in the studio with our Journalist Roundtable. This week we have Linda Valdez of the Arizona Republic, David Rupp-Calvis of Tucson Local Media, and Zach Ziegler of Arizona Public Media. I bet you're all happy we're not at the landfill for this segment.
Very much.
Absolutely. Let's get right into the week's news. And Linda, I want to start with you. Really, the biggest story of the whole week for the whole state has been this education funding plan that, as we speak, the legislature is still working on the final votes to get that passed. So tell us what it is.
Absolutely. Well, it's very big. It's the settlement of a 5-year-old lawsuit that deals with money that was illegally withheld from the schools. And it's passed the House. It's working its way through the Senate now. There are 3 parts to what the legislature is doing. One outlines the bill, the settlement itself, which is a $3.5 billion settlement over 10 years that will go to the schools. And the majority of that comes from the State Land Trust. The other 2 components of this deal with the fact that that comes from the State Land Trust. One, it has to have voter approval to change the Constitution. One of the bills sets the date at May 17th to go to the voters for that, and they will be asked to approve several changes to the Constitution. One is to increase the amount of money that comes from the State Land Trust from 2.5% to 6.9% for 10 years. And the other part of it creates various escape clauses from the requirement to fund schools for inflation. And one of those is in hard economic times, they don't have to fund for inflation. And another one is that if school funding reaches 49% of the state budget, they don't have to fund for inflation. Both of those have raised concerns.
And I just want to ask a follow-up about how that State Land Trust works, because I'm not sure everybody is up to speed on that. So it's a whole bunch of land that was set aside when Arizona became a state, and we sell pieces of it to use that money to fund education periodically, right?
Yes, there's also money in the trust itself. There's I think $5 billion in the trust right now, and schools get a certain amount of the proceeds from investment of that money and
that's
from
what you meant
the
by the
sales
2%.
of land. Right,
Okay.
the 2%, right, 2.5% right now is what they're allowed to give to schools. Schools are the major beneficiaries of the state land trust, and they want to boost that to 6.9% for 10 years.
And what are some of the concerns people have with the plan?
Well, the current Republican treasurer, Jeff DeWitt, says that that's too much, that you shouldn't take more than, I think he says 3.9% out, or you're going to start depleting the principal. And a former state treasurer, also a Republican, Dean Martin, was at the legislature yesterday expressing concerns that this might violate the Enabling Act when the federal government gave us the land trust, and also that it is going to deplete too much of the land trust and cause future funding problems.
I know Dean Martin had mentioned this is going to turn one lawsuit into two lawsuits. Was that kind of part of the concerns that he was seeing, or does he even think this isn't going far enough to kind of cover the shortfall that there was from education funding?
No, he's talked about, and actually another lawsuit, because he believes that it violates the Enabling Act, that only Congress can approve that kind of a change. The governor's lawyers say, no, that's not the case, that the state can do this. But I think it might end up exchanging one lawsuit for another, which would delay money to the schools.
And if the state starts seeing the money in the trust fund drop, are they going to be pressured to start selling more of this land?
Well, there is another escape clause in this provision that if it is depleting the trust too much, they can slow down the withdrawals. So they say that they've built in protections for that.
What is the Democratic Party's response? The state lawmakers who are Democrats, what's their response to this plan?
Their concern is that there's no need to go to the land trust for this money. There's currently a surplus, $300 some million surplus, and there's also $500 million in the rainy day fund. So so the money is there. The state has the money now to meet its obligation to the schools, and there's no need to go to the land trust. That's one of their concerns. They're also concerned about the 49%, because right now schools are about 42% of the state budget. So if you are engaged in reducing the size of government and reducing taxes, which are priorities for Doug Ducey, you could reach that 49%, and that's a concern for them. And also, I think writing all this into the Constitution is a concern.
And so, as we said, the House already approved this. The Senate is looking at it today, presumably because Governor Doug Ducey was part of creating the plan, that he'll sign it into law. So then the next step would be it goes to voters, you said, in May.
Correct, yeah. And this is a big priority for the governor. He negotiated the deal, and he was down at the legislature last night whipping up votes. So this is very important to him. And it was really presented as a one-size-fits-all deal. You vote for it, you don't make changes.
And so for voters, that means a presidential primary election in the spring, this state education funding election in May, our normal primaries in probably late August, and then another regular election in November of next year. So a busy election year for voters.
Get your voting shoes on.
And is there a plan B if the voters say no?
Not that I know of.
So this is all or nothing?
This is all or nothing for this plan. I mean, if the settlement doesn't go through, the lawsuit still exists, and it's still being appealed. So it will proceed through the courts.
David and Zach, you both cover business, and we've heard throughout the years that businesses are supportive of improving education in the Tucson area so that we can attract good businesses to the area. Are we hearing any response so far from them on the plan, or are they waiting to weigh in?
I think most of them are probably waiting. I think in general, they would be happy with any improvements, because education is a huge thing. I mean, anytime you want to attract a new business or grow your own business, you have to find qualified, competent employees, and the better educated they are, the better off you are. And so I think any improvements to education is a good thing for business. I think majority of them are waiting to see. This happened real quick. Mm-hmm. I know they've been working on it behind the scenes, but as far as publicly coming out with the details, this happened real quick. And so there's a lot of learning still to be going on to see exactly what it means.
Even parts of this week, we didn't know what was in this plan until late.
Yeah,
Zach?
large portions of this week. And really, yeah, the business community hasn't had much time to kind of coalesce and say anything. I'm sure we will start to hear things, but what their main concern is just like what David said, just ensuring that schools get that top funding, because another issue that they have is when you want to entice someone to come to Arizona to move here so that you're recruiting, out-of-state talent, they ask, well, how are the schools for my kids? And right now, that's a bit of a tough sell.
It's also important to the business community not to raise taxes, and this achieves that. It doesn't raise taxes, and it also leaves a surplus so that the governor can continue to cut taxes, which is a priority of his.
So we will see if this makes it to the ballot, which we're presuming it will. We'll see where those business groups come out, because I'm sure they will be lobbying one way or another. We'll see where they are. Yes. David, I want to talk about the cover story for Inside Tucson Business this week, which is a competition that you covered, a sort of a reality show or a TV show style competition that is happening in Tucson for local startup businesses. Tell us what this is all about.
Well, let's get started Tucson. It's a partnership between Cox Business and Inc. magazine. Inside Tucson Business joined in as a media partner. And basically what it is they've invited dozens and dozens of businesses to apply. On November the 5th, they're going to have their final competition, and it's going to be Shark Tank style. And if anyone's watched Shark Tank, entrepreneurs come in, they stand before a group of 4 or 5 people, and they present their business and try to convince them why they should invest in that business. In this specific case, there will be 5 finalists that are all going to go. They're going to present their business plan, tell everyone what's great about their business, and try to get this group to choose them. The overall winner gets a big check. But one of the things that's really exciting about it is more than just the winner and the money. Each of the 5 finalists is going to be aligned with a specific professional in their field that'll be their mentor, that'll help them grow. I mean, these are all startups. Some of them are brand new. Some of them have been around for a few years. Some of them, and they're all different. I mean, we don't know all of them yet. We know a couple, but they're all different. So they're going to pick a professional that's already out there, that's proven he or she knows exactly what they're doing and can succeed.
In the same field?
In as close as they can get.
Okay.
And have that person mentor these business people. So even if you don't walk away with the big check, you're going to walk away with a lot of help, I would assume.
And Zach, you covered another similar style competition. Tell us about that one, and I'm actually why there are 2.
Well, there are way more than 2, actually.
Okay.
Idea Funding was the one that I covered. It was a part of, it was rolled into 10 West this year, which was a much larger scale startup festival, if you will, startup and tech festival. Idea Funding's been going on for, I think, almost 20 years now, but it's now fallen into the hands of Startup Tucson to run it. And it's kind of the similar idea, because you get that mentorship, but also you get a chance to kind of learn the real world questions you might be asked when it's time to kind of give that elevator pitch to a potential investor that I got to be quick. I have only a couple of minutes here to tell this person about this. So they can then basically know what questions are going to be coming back. If they don't have a good answer, at this time, they end up thinking, oh, okay, I got to get an answer to that. That's a question that an investor wants to know. Whereas in the future, they could make that pitch and lose out on an investor.
That's the end of the pitch, yeah. Now, David, do you think these are actual viable ways to find viable businesses, or is it kind of reality reflecting entertainment?
I think it's a bit of both. What happened is Shark Tank became so popular that entrepreneurs out there, and they've been out there the whole time, they just never had a venue to show off their ideas and to try to raise money. And these, it's become so popular across the nation that these groups are coming up and saying, we'll help you. And sometimes it works, sometimes it fails. But, I was talking to Zach yesterday, my wife and I watch Shark Tank, and, every time we watch a show, someone will come up with an idea that we'll say, we thought about that. But, it takes a big step between thinking about this is something that's needed and actually putting your money and your life and your time on the line to do it. So, I think it's a good thing. It shows that people are out there and they're taking chances and they're willing to take risks. And, I hope most of them succeed.
So risks on the part of the people pitching those businesses, what's the risk for the investors?
Well, the risk for the investors, you lose your money. I mean, they choose wisely, most of them. Most investors are in the position to invest because they've made wise choices through their lives and through their professional careers, and they have money to do so. So they're not going to risk a whole lot on things that that when they're listening to it, that don't make a lot of sense to them. They will put their money on the line for projects that they think will succeed or that they think they can help succeed. And so a lot of them are pretty choosy, that they're not necessarily going to be risk takers, but anytime you put your money on the line in a business sense, there's a chance you could lose it all.
We've been hearing about a lot of kind of startup business incubators, organizations that are here to help startups get started in Tucson. Is this sort of an outcropping of that? I mean, they all go together, but did these competitions come up because we have a bunch of startups, because we have incubators?
I think so. And I think we have an abnormal amount of startups in Tucson for a couple of reasons. Number one, we have some amazing students that are finishing up at the U of A, and they can't get a job. This job market isn't really good. So, they've thought of things as they've gone through college. Now they have a degree, now they're out there, and they're going to just put their money and their time on the line for themselves because they've applied to 4 or 5 or 6 places and they can't get a job. Our economy is a large part of it. People have lost jobs, and all of a sudden they can't find work, so they say, okay, then I'm going to try it myself. And so a lot of that, but the incubators are a good step. And when someone decides, if I were to decide tomorrow, I want to start a business, I have no idea how to start a business. So there are organizations out there that can sit you down and say, if you want to start, these are some steps you should take. These are what you should think about. This is how you can secure funding. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed, but at least there's someone there to walk you through those steps instead of, most people in the past have learned by failing. They tried to raise money and it didn't work, so they had to try another way to raise money. And finally, the 3rd or 4th or 5th time around, they found something that worked. And those people are now willing to tell you, you can skip these first 3 or 4 steps that don't work, and we're willing to help you out and make it work. So it's a good thing. You
mentioned U of A students, and that reminds me there's also an entrepreneurship program at the Ehlers College of Management, and I believe there's also one at ASU. So it's not just the outside, after you graduate trying to start a business, but there's people trying to do this during college. That's the point of their
degree. Some of them have been very successful. Young men and women that are doing things that amaze me.
Well, that's good, right? We
Yes,
can't think of it, someone else can. Zach, I also want to touch on a topic you covered this week, which is the unveiling of an electric bus in Tucson. Tell us, we're not actually moving toward electric buses yet, are we?
Not yet, no. This was a test, and it's still years off. The next purchase that SunTran has said they will be making, they've already scheduled it in 2018, and that's going to be further compressed natural gas buses. So this was a ways off, but it was kind of a way to get a test run. The manufacturer said, hey, let us bring a bus down. You can check it out, see how it runs. And so SunTran said, sure, why not? We'll take an opportunity to get a bus route ran for pretty much free for a couple of days.
And it actually was on the routes people were riding this bus. It wasn't just for display or something.
Yeah, it was running on varying express routes because it actually worked out best. Current electric buses, at least from this manufacturer, BYD, only get 150 to 200 miles of charge. Well, if you run it on an express route, those routes don't run all day, so you can run it in the morning and then take it back and charge it, and then get it back out in the afternoon and run it some more. That's why they chose that particular route. So there's still some bugs to be worked out like that. They couldn't run one of these all day. But who knows, maybe by 2019, 2020, when there's talk of purchasing more buses, maybe the battery life will be extended by then.
Well, and actually that mention of 200 miles is much better. We used to hear about 100 miles, even for a car. So 200 for a bus, surely they have more batteries, but that's an improvement right there.
Yeah, now it's definitely starting to get in a more usable range. And there are cities that are using these buses because their routes are less than that, and it actually works out very well for them to use these electric buses. Now it's just a matter of kind of waiting for it to hit that optimal point, and then maybe it could be considered. The other issue is the cost. These run about $800,000 a piece. A compressed natural gas bus is closer to $600,000. A biodiesel bus down around $400,000 or $500,000. So still a big price difference.
And did you get a sense when you went to that demo of where SunTran is on this? You mentioned they're buying CNG for the next few years, but are they looking at electric for after that?
They're definitely keeping an eye out, but they said that the big thing is just waiting for the technology to get to where it is truly usable for them.
And they only tested one bus one time this year, correct?
Yeah, they had it running for 3 days, one bus running on a handful of routes. So it wasn't quite it wasn't like they were doing a citywide test. They just kind of wanted to get a feel for it, see how it worked, see what their drivers even thought about it.
All right, well, thank you all for coming in. Again, we're not at the landfill. I'm sure you're happy about that. That's it for this week. As always, you can find more content from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom on our website. If you want more analysis of the state education funding deal lawmakers reached this week, stay tuned for Arizona Week. Thanks for watching.